So welcome. My name is Chris Wilkins. I'm an engineering manager at Tableau, and this is my co-speaker, Aruna. And you are in the, like a boss, deploying Tableau Desktop session. So if this is not the session you want to be in, welcome to the best session of the conference right here. So, I'm curious, how many people in the audience manage, say, 10 desktops or more? Okay, great. You're our audience. Another question, how many people are using or planning on using virtual machines or virtual desktops? Yeah? Everybody. Well, okay. Okay, some. Good. So, I'll let Aruna introduce yourself.
All right. Again, welcome everyone. My name is Aruna Balasubramanian. I'm a product manager and I work on licensing at Tableau, so desktop and server. And I've been with Tableau for 5 years. Of 2 of those, I've closely worked with Chris, who's the manager for the licensing team and security teams. And a fun fact about Chris is that every year he goes on a vintage biking event to California, where you ride on bikes that are in mid-80s or earlier. And so I always imagine Chris on his bike creaking his way up a hill, but he tells me it's not quite like that.
It's a little faster than creak. Well, there's some creaking. There is creaking. My knees creak more. And Aruna, actually, not only does she speak English, she also speaks 3 other languages. And as a PM, she does a fair amount of talking. And so yearly, so that she can recharge, she will actually go on a retreat where they are silent for 10 days. So anyway, let's get started. Okay, so what are we talking about today? We're talking about desktop, okay? That's the scope of this talk. We're talking about how you can deploy and manage desktop. Important to note, we're not talking about server. We're not talking about mobile, okay? Mobile's not in scope. Desktop is.
There are other sessions in this conference where you can learn about server as well as mobile, but for this purpose of this presentation, it's desktops only.
Yeah. So we're going to cover 3 broad topics, okay? We're going to talk about planning your deployment. And planning, as we all know, you want to measure twice so that you can cut once and do it right the first time, okay? We're going to talk about the mechanics of how you actually do deployments, and then we're going to talk about how you can track your software, okay? We're happy to answer questions as we go. There will be time for questions at the end as well, so more broad questions we may defer toward the end.
And at the end of this, we are hoping that you can manage your desktops like a boss.
There we go.
All right. So I'm going to take over for a little bit here. So as Chris said, we're going to talk about 3 main topics. The first one is planning. And what we want to give you here is some questions to consider as you think about deploying Tableau desktops. Many of this you already know, but we just want to walk through it very quickly just to set the tone for the presentation. So there are 2 versions of Tableau, 2 editions of Tableau Desktop, personal and professional. Most people know that. Personal is about file-based data sources. Professional covers everything, including web data connections. We have systems requirements that we update every single release so that you know what new platforms we support, but also if our system requirements have changed from release to release. Version compatibility has been a big deal, especially when you have a Tableau server and desktop, right? So you talk about server being on the same version as desktop, so people can easily publish, other people can actually consume that workbook. We also have desktops that can be installed side by side. So you have people who are trying out new features in a new version of desktop, but once they upgrade their workbooks, they can always not go back. However, we're changing that, and you heard a little bit about that at the devs on stage yesterday, right? Network access is important for 2 reasons, for licensing as well as for maps. Now, we do allow offline access, but it's a little more painful. But if you are thinking about maps or licensing, then you want to make sure that your proxy servers or your firewalls are configured appropriately. And the last one really is database drivers. And we have a really great database page where we show you all the versions that we support. We want to make sure that your version of Tableau Desktop works with the right version of database, right? And the next one is really, and as we walk through this presentation, we have a few boss tips for you. This is tips that will help you hopefully manage your desktops better, or things that are coming up in the next few releases. And this is, again, a throwback to yesterday's Devs on Stage, where you saw us publishing from new versions of desktop to older versions of server, and also exporting from new versions of desktop to older versions of workbook, right? That makes sharing much easier. So here are some tools and resources of things that we're going to talk about. The first one is the desktop guide, deployment guide. This is something that we published late last year, and we took all the content we had on managing desktops, both for administrators as well as for self-service, and we put it in one place. We cleaned it up, and so it's a huge resource for anybody who's trying to learn how to either deploy for the first time or to upgrade your deployments. The second one really is what's new. Many people know this, but as you think about deployment, you may want to pay attention to new features that are coming up that you may be able to use. And finally, just links to the database drivers page. We can't stress enough the testing that is important in your environment, because it might be slightly different from how we test within Tableau. We try to do our best to catch bugs before we ship, but it's not always possible. So testing in your environment is hugely important. We also have a really great beta program. I don't know if people have tried the beta program, but there are two useful things from that. One is, obviously, you test an environment, you know what's coming up, you know what's changing. But secondly, you have a great way of influencing our feature. So if you give us feedback in time, we will incorporate that in the same release before it goes out. So it's hugely important for you as well to influence. And I'll talk about a couple of small things that we added as part of our beta program that made it into our features. All right, so that was planning. Now that you have planned, this is the meat of the presentation. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time in deployment. We're going to talk about a couple of different deployment options. The first one is really self-service. This is where you have a user who's installing on their machine. Now, a number of our customers have a large number of desktops, but they also have one version that they validate and test and put it on a file share, and then they point people to that and say, go and get it from there and install it. So this is those one single machine installs. This may be familiar to you. This is what our installer looks like. It's really a full XC installer. It's based on Wix toolset. We made it really simple where you can click through and easily, in a few clicks, you're done. We have added the most common data sources that you might think of, that this is to reduce the end user from having to go and search for database drivers. We have some common drivers, and we have customizable options, so fairly simple. We also more recently moved from a from a drag and drop installer to a full Apple installer. And so it has a number of customizable options. It gives you the same flexibility that you have with Windows, including side-by-side installs, logging, more security, because now we can sign the binaries, right? So it gives you a little more benefits, and so we have seen that being used by our customers, and also for silent installs, it's really great. So it becomes interesting, obviously, for you guys. Oh, you have a question? Yes.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Yeah.
If I have a user that has, they have a Windows PC that they use as a desktop, but they also have a Mac that they travel, from meeting to meeting.
Yeah.
If they install it one on both, does that count as one license or two?
So with each license, you can actually install on two machines. So it can be a laptop, it can be Windows, it can be Mac, it can be a virtual machine. But with each license, you can actually have two installations. Okay. So here, you're good. Okay. Yes?
In the previous screen, you showed the install. Yeah, right there. What's underneath that other pop-up window? Is it customized part?
Right here? The
Go back and one more slide.
one more slide.
Yeah, there's a customize there on that window. Does that allow you to add parameters to the install?
So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So I'll come to scripted installs. This one is just a basic GUI installer. So there's basic customizable options where, for example, auto updates is on, you can turn it off, right? Or you can select, where your desktop gets installed. Those are the options. That's what I meant by here. Yeah. Okay. All right. So enterprise deployment. This is many desktops deploying to multiple desktops, and so this is where scripting becomes important, right? So. Like I explained, we have a full XC installer. If you look on the left side, we show all the different installer options. We've increased that. It no longer fits on the screen, so it's a little out of date. But really, it's MSI under the covers. So you can actually even blow up the installer and reduce the number of reduce the installer size if you care about that, and just take the Tableau installer. Here's kind of what I think you were alluding to. This is where you can customize. You can also enable features, such as auto update. You can turn it on or off. You can accept EULA. You can do different things here, right? And as we go through presentation, we'll show you additional options. But this is just a basic silent install, right, that gets bits on the machine. When we talk about Mac, we have something very similar. So Apple gives you a custom XML that you can modify and you can customize. And so it's very, very simple there. The one boss tip we have for you is that in 10.5, in beta right now, is an installer option to activate your product key. So you don't have to go and do it after the fact. You can do it as part of your installation. So that's coming in 10.5. All right, so we also have support. Obviously, a lot of you probably use some kind of a deployment tool to package your installers and send it to your end user machines. So we do support SCCM and like technologies. Anything that supports MSI and XCs, we definitely support that. We heard that there are some versions of SCCM that do not support XCs, they only support MSIs. If that is the case, then there's a Wix utility that can help you explode the underlying MSIs, and then you can use that MSI and do it. But usually the XC that we have supports all the installer options that MSIs would, right? All right, finally, a word on auto upgrade. Anyone here uses this feature? Some of you do. So we know that a lot of people don't like this feature, but I'm going to go very quickly and give you one boss tip here. So obviously, it's for maintenance releases only, and our thought here was that people care about security patches, they care about stability fixes, so we want to give that to them. But we understand that a lot of customers actually want to even validate and test even a maintenance release before it goes on a user's machine, so we understand that. From a feature perspective, all it is that when the desktop launches, it's talking to our download site. It's checking to see if there's a new version of maintenance release, the version that you have on the machine. And then if it is, then it's going to download it, right? Yes?
So that update feature does not require administrative ability?
It does require administrator ability and privileges, unfortunately. There is a way for us to, if the product has been licensed before, then it usually should not, but we have not been able to isolate it yet, but it's something that we are looking at. Yeah. So like I said, it's on by default, and we know that people are not crazy about that. But the big tip I have for you on this slide is that you can set up your own site, HTTPS site. You can put the version of Tableau that you want your users to use. You can set up the XML file. We have a sample of XML file that you will have to update to point to that particular version. And now when you enable auto update on your user machines, it'll talk to your internal site. And you can update your machines easily that way. So it's not a very well-known feature, so I just wanted to call that out. All right. So now to talk about product activation. So we have deployed now either on a single machine or on a number of machines, and now what do we do about product activation? So to talk about that, back to Chris.
All right. Okay, so Product activation. So as you've already seen, we offer the ability to script the activation of a license key, okay? And you also have the ability to script registration, okay, by putting information into the registry or into a properties list on a Mac. So this is automatable. Now, today, when you activate a license onto your machine, it results in what's called a permanent activation, okay? So a permanent activation is tied to that machine. And the problem is that in order to use that activation on a different machine, you have to deactivate from the first machine, okay? And that activation is lost if your machine is re-imaged or lost, okay, or somebody walks out the door with it, and it's gone because it was tied to that machine and you did not explicitly deactivate first, okay? So this is especially bad on non-persistent virtual machines because they're designed to be wiped out and create a new one, and that is why to date we have not supported non-persistent virtual machines because of this exact problem, okay? So this is the workflow for permanent activation. Your desktop sends the product key over to our licensing server and you get back a permanent activation that gets installed on the machine, and now Tableau Desktop knows that it's allowed to run. So we have talked with more than a couple of people who have expressed frustration and pain around this behavior because of lost activations. So we have been working on a new technology that we're calling authorization to run, okay? And with this feature, desktop is now getting what we're calling ATRs, or authorization to run, from a server that we run. And that's instead of a permanent activation, okay? So this is something that is temporary. It's for a finite amount of time. Your desktop is going to reach out on a periodic basis in the background to get an extension on the ATR, okay? If it doesn't do a renewal, then eventually that ATR is going to expire and the desktop is going to no longer be activated. It's not going to be licensed anymore. So the advantage to this is you don't actually do an explicit deactivation. It just expires, okay? And you have the option of configuring how long the ATR is that you're asking for. So the desktop, when it reaches out, you can say that I want it to be short, I want it to be long, okay? And the product key that you're entering is the same as you would do for permanent activation. So it's not a different product key, it's the same thing, and the user experience is essentially identical, okay? So if you are dealing with virtual machines, non-persistent virtual machines that are going to be, wiped out once a day, then it's probably in your best interest to ask for ATRs that are good for a short amount of time, okay? If, on the other hand, you're dealing with machines that are going to be offline for some period of time, in that case, you want to ask for an extended ATR because that way the machine can be offline and continue to work for an extended period of time, okay? And if you don't specify it, you're going to get the default, and the default is something that is going to work well for most situations, okay? And the workflow looks remarkably similar in that the product key is sent to our licensing server and an ATR is returned. And then periodically, the desktop is going to do a renewal so it can get an extension, okay? And it will do this on a schedule where most of the time you have the bulk of your ATR lifespan left, okay? So if you go and get on a plane, you're probably going to have 90% of your lease left, okay? So should you use this feature? Well, that's a good question. So your desktop has to be able to reach out to this URL periodically. If it cannot, if you have a firewall that's in the way or you're on an air-gapped network or something like that, it's not going to work, okay? Doesn't have to be continuous. It's not going to be contacting the server every 5 seconds. That's not the point. But if it's unable to connect to this for long enough, then your ATR is going to expire, and now you can't run desktop. Okay? So this is good for virtual machines, machines that have internet access, or if IT has this habit of going and re-imaging machines sporadically, right, and you've just lost your activations, this is meant to address that pain. Okay? This is not good if your machines are not online. You know, if you are doing offline activation, this feature is not supported. Okay? So, now, I believe that we're actually calling the feature virtual desktop support. Okay? That is the name of the feature in the beta documentation. It is an opt-in feature. What that means is that if you install and run Tableau Desktop, by default, you're going to do a permanent activation. Okay? So this is something you have to opt into. You have to turn it on. Okay? And this is very important. Right now, it is a beta feature. Okay? So it's actually in the release version of 10.4. It's in the beta version of 10.5. We expect it to be in the release version of 10.5. But the feature as a whole, we're still working the kinks out on the server side, okay? So we're trying hard to get this to a production feature, but we don't want you to bet the farm on it quite yet, okay? But we want you to use it. Just, you know, if you do a mass rollout and everybody's in a world of trouble if it doesn't work, please don't do that quite yet, okay? So how do you enable it? So these are the locations on Windows and Mac of where they show up in the registry or in the properties list. This is how you do it via script, okay? It is optional, being able to specify the ATR duration that's being requested. Just because you specify a duration doesn't mean you're going to get that. That's really up to our service to determine what you're going to get, but it's helpful if we understand what you're trying to do, and that's indicated by the duration that you're specifying, okay? Okay, so let's talk about deploying in virtual environments. So obviously, I just talked about the ATR feature and virtual desktop support. So we are now supporting, in a beta fashion, non-persistent VDIs. Okay? So these are common technologies that are used to do this, but really this is any virtual machine technology. Okay? And activation and registration, again, you can script it just like you can on a normal piece of hardware. Okay? So it's scriptable, you can do it manually, same thing. And then for a long time, we have also supported virtual application sharing, such as Citrix XenApp. And so in this case, you typically have multiple Citrix servers, and you know, configure it in the way that works for this. So, yeah. And if you turn on roaming profiles, that can help reduce registration requests to end users. So if you find yourself in this situation, this may help you. Okay. So we've just covered a bunch of stuff regarding deployment, so I thought that it would be useful for us to have a brief summary of what we covered. So we talked about how you can install it, so obviously self-service and scripted. Installation environment, whether you're doing it on a physical machine, virtual application sharing, or a virtual desktop, and then how you activate the product. So that's, and it's important to note that you can mix and match all of these things. Okay? So you can do ATR or permanent on any of those installation environments, installation method, same thing, mix and match. Okay? So the only thing you can't use ATR for is offline activation. So, yes?
You talk about installation methods. Is there a script that you can write to uninstall if the user goes to an unsupported version? For example, someone wants to upgrade to 10.4, but we're only supporting.
Is there a way to script uninstalling a desktop?
I've got something to not only comment on that, but also append to it. So yes, there is a script to uninstall it. However, what we have found and what my intended question is so far you have to specify the exact version that you are uninstalling. So like, say our supported version was 10.1.4, like it has to go down all the way to the minor version of the release. You have to state that uninstaller in there. But is there a way to open that up and just say, get rid of any previous version of Tableau Desktop that's installed?
I like this question. I do not have an answer off the top of my head.
So there is not at today. However, this is something that we've been hearing a lot about. So I'm happy to take that feedback and pass it on to the teams to help us prioritize it. But yeah, we don't have support for that today, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Piggybacking off of that, just real quick, your support has said keep a repository of every version of the MSI because you've got to have those exact MSIs to go and uninstall using the scripts with an uninstall flag. Because we learned the hard way, we had to go back and re-download the older versions if you get people off of multiple versions. And that's what they even, the support gave us. Yeah, here's exactly what you have to do.
Okay. Okay. So tech support is providing a solution, but it sounds like it could be simpler.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's because you guys have the version built in. But the problem is one question is there any future down the road to say, will it overwrite? Because that's one thing it does not do, because like you said, you can install
Side by
10.2,
side.
10.4, 10.5.
Right.
Is there a way to script it to say, I'm installing 10.5, now I want the rest going, because what we had to do is build a script to say, I want 10.2 pulled off, and then I want 10.5 reinstalled.
Yeah, so that's a little tricky because we have a great beta program and a lot of people actually want to test out new features. We've had to make the balance of being able to support side by side so people actually can try out new features. And so trying to do this and just overwriting it might, some of those use cases might not be supported. So it's a little tricky. We'll have to figure out how to do it right, but I hear you that seems like it's a pain point for you.
Yes.
I know for a fact that I overwrote a couple of images that have permanent keys. I assume support can help unlock those instances. You have re-imaged the machine with an instance of Tableau Desktop.
Yes.
Obviously, I've lost that.
Yes.
Can you repeat the question?
So the question is, so in the case where you have lost activations by re-imaging a machine, is there a way to get those activations back? And the answer is yes. Please don't do it frequently, though. But yes, you can reach out to technical support, and I believe that we can help you out. So yeah, there's a way to do it. So.
And if you switch over to ATR, though, say that you were in that boat and you got several licenses that are burned up by that. If you switch over to the ATR on those license keys, would that?
So ATR comes out of the same pool. So if you burn through all your activations via permanent activation, you're still out of activations. Now, the point of the ATR feature is that it helps prevent you from getting into that situation in the first place. Okay.
So, would that clear, like if it actually processed through, so say that it had one tied on a machine that was permanent existing,
Okay.
and then you switched to the ATR, so that they had two laptops or whatever.
So let's say that you have a total of 2 activations available to you when you purchase your license, right? So if you do a permanent activation onto one machine, okay, you're down to one that's available, and then you use the ATR feature on a different machine, that's going to consume another activation. So you now have 0 left, okay? So in order to use the ATR feature on yet another machine with the same license key, you would want to relinquish, you'd want to deactivate on your permanent activation, okay? Or let your ATR expire on this other machine. Either thing would do it.
So what you're saying is one key can have both options.
Yes. Yes, the keys can be used in both ways. But the total count is still the same.
Still the same.
Exactly. Yes?
So with ATR, say you have an extended term like 3 months, and that laptop gets lost, do you have to wait for the rest of that ATR to expire before reactivating it, or will it be a background process?
Right, so the question is, if you wipe a machine that has an ATR on it, and let's say that the ATR duration is 3 months, do you have to wait in order to use that, to get that activation back such that you can use it on a different machine? And the answer is yes, you do. And so the point of the ATR feature is that you will want to pick your ATR duration that you request such that you can deal with, so if you're doing it in the same place you would currently use permanent activations, you can probably tolerate a couple months without that activation being available, okay?
So I'd like to just add to that. So one thing is we allow 2 activations per license key, right? But just for the fact that you will get into situations where both your machines have gone away because they're virtual machines now, and that you don't have to call support, on the ATR feature, we do have 1 buffer. So we've put that in intentionally because we know that people will burn through their activation. So we have up to 3. So it's not that dire, but we want you to be thoughtful about using it. Yeah.
So does it renew that ATR like in advance? Like say I've got a week on an ATR, does it say I'm 6 days in, I'm gonna renew it now, so it's got a buffer time?
So the question is, how often is it going to renew? And the answer is that we anticipate that it will renew much more frequently than how long the ATR is good for. So if the ATR is good for a month, I would expect it to actually go renew every few days, okay? So that at any point in time, you have the bulk of the month left, okay? So if you want to let the ATR expire, you need to stop running the software. So you could either re-image the machine, you could uninstall Tableau Desktop, okay, that kind of thing. Yes, Josh?
Just a quick point of clarification. You do have still the ability to actually deactivate the ATR from the machine, right? So if you have a known uninstallation event, you can still throw it back.
Today, we do not offer a deactivation functionality for ATRs. You must wait for it to expire. I'm glad that you asked the question. So,
The thing that we do offer, I'm sorry, just to add to what he said, the thing that we do offer is if you have maintenance renewals happening, you can update maintenance renewals. So 2 things. One is, as part of the ATR request, when it tries or renews next time, it automatically will get the most recent renewal date. So if you have updated your maintenance, you don't have to wait for people to go and hit the refresh button. The next time it renews, it will get the maintenance date automatically. But the second thing is, even if it doesn't happen, we still enable you to have to go and manually refresh the button, right? So we do support that, just the expiration button is actually going to be disabled. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Aruna, you anticipated the question. Nice, okay.
Okay, cool. Let's hold other questions to the end if that's okay, because we want to make sure we get to the content, and then we'll have more time for questions.
It's an exciting topic.
Okay, right.
Okay.
All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about deployment, the final area that we want to talk about is tracking. So this is where you want to make sure that you know who is using Tableau Desktops, how often they're using it, right? Or are they using it now? They've asked for a license, and they seem really excited about it, but are they still using it, right? So we added a feature in version 10 called Desktop Reporting. And so this is a feature where you have a centralized view of Tableau desktops on your Tableau server, right? So we added 2 new administrative views. We call them license usage and license expiration. That gives you a little bit of visibility. Now, it doesn't let you go and deactivate licenses and things like that, but our first step was let's give you visibility. And as you heard with the ATR feature, we are slowly moving towards giving you that control. So ATR feature is a first step. You don't get full control yet. But our hope is that we'll build on features slowly where we'll now be able to give you the control that you want, okay? All right, so coming back to this feature. So it is on, if it is off by default, you have to enable your desktops to actually talk to your, your servers. Yeah, so the server is off also, so you need to turn it on there. The reason we did that is we wanted to make sure that since a server is an unauthenticated endpoint, So we are sending the information from the desktop to the server in the background. We wanted to make sure that you were aware of it when you turn on the feature. Also, we recommend that you turn on SSL so that the information is encrypted in the wire, right? So those are the things that we did. But really, this feature is useful because you can have desktops only in your organization, but maybe there's a Tableau server in a different organization, and you can still send the information to that server and get a centralized view or single source of truth. And so the information that's sent from the desktop to the server is in Postgres. It's stored in Postgres. It's a table called desktop reporting. And you can create your own custom admin views, and you can answer the questions you want. So we have 2 canned reports that we show you, but obviously you may have other questions. Hey, are my licenses being shared? Now that's not in our canned report, but you can answer that question if you want using this table, okay? I'm sorry? This is not in Tableau Online. That's a great question. So we did not enable support for Tableau Online, but if that's a major use case for you, there is no. Okay. Yes? It is mainly for administrators. Now we've had people ask that question, hey, how do I get other people access to it? Because right now it's just an admin view. And what we've said is that if you have custom views that you create, you can then publish it out and make it put it in a protected project and give access to people who want it. However, there is even the admin views that we put on the machine actually are stored on a drive on that machine, on the server machine, and you can get access to that as well. And then you can then share it out to the people you want. But since this is sensitive and it has license key information, we wanted to make sure that only admins had access to it. Okay, so here's kind of what you can track with it. We can track all kinds of SKUs, including reader, if that's something that your people use. And this came again out of beta feedback. We had people saying, hey, we have readers. Can you support readers? And so we said we were happy to do that. And we also support all kinds of license keys, including OEM bills. So that will show up as well. The main thing to remember on what will not be supported is if your desktop is not configured, since it's an opt-in feature, if it is not configured, you're not going to see it. So that's the big caveat, I guess. And so that's true for personal machines as well. I was hoping, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes.
Do the desktop versions have to be publishing to the server? Or
No.
just part of the install?
They just have to be installed on the machines, and they have to be configured to report to the server. They don't have to be published. They don't have to be server users, nothing like that. Yeah, that's a good question.
Why it's an unauthenticated endpoint is because the server is happy to receive traffic from any desktop. Okay. So.
Yes.
Can this be pushed out to installations that have already
Yes.
installed?
Yes, absolutely. So within Tableau, when we were doing beta on this feature internally, we used group policy to push it out. So we were able to get everybody within Tableau reporting to our dog food server, which is Alpo, and they were able to use the feature. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll talk about that in just a bit. So I was hoping to give you a live demo, but unfortunately, Chris's machine can't connect to the Wi-Fi here. So I have screenshots. They're not great, but he gives you a little bit of a view. So what you're seeing here is a report that we call license usage. And you see a summary view on top, which tells you if you have term-based keys or permanent keys. And then if you have trials, it'll show you trials. And really the view on the top is telling you how many active licenses do you have right now? How many people are actually actively using? And the marks will show you when was the last time that it reported back to the server. Okay? And the one below is we also tell you if someone has not used their licenses for last 90 days, we show that information as well. So you can then take the appropriate action and ask them, hey, are you really using this license? And if they're not, then you give to someone who actually wants to use it. Right? And then we also have a report on maintenance. This is for expiration. So right on the top, there's a view that shows all the licenses that have expired on your machine, in your organization. So if it is intended to be that way, great. But it also gives you a way to go, and if it is not the case, then it gives you a way to go back to Tableau and say, hey, actually this license still wants to be used, right? We also show you what the maintenance schedule is, when is your next maintenance coming up. And then once you have renewed your maintenance, you can go back and look and see to make sure that all the machines have been updated. Because I know we heard that it's a pain point for some of our customers. They don't always know if they are currently in maintenance or not. So we thought we'll give them a report. And the one below is basically telling you all the trials that have expired. And so you can, if that's something that you're interested in, again, like I said, it came out of our beta feedback. Seems like some people were interested in tracking their trials. So we were happy to put it into the report. Here's the group policy I was talking about. So here's how you can enable this feature on both Windows as well as Mac. So it's registry keys and plist files. And here are installer options on how you can enable it and package this feature so that it can be enabled as you install it on desktops. Yes?
So back to the expiration usage.
Uh-huh.
So does it actually track the productivity? Like, okay, this person knows that I'm checking it, so they just open it once a week. But does it actually show, well, this person was in this product every day? Or for like 2 seconds? Exactly. Because we've
Yeah.
got tracking software, and some of my users have figured out that they go in every Monday, they start all their programs.
Yeah.
Just to say, oh, I'm using it.
Right,
Really,
right,
we're
right.
not.
So we're not tracking duration. That's a good question. So what we are tracking is, by default, it sends the information to the server every 8 hours. And so you see the report being refreshed on a daily basis or on an 8-hour basis. And you can see who's actually most, like, if the reporting date was today, then I know that person has been using. And if you can see that on a daily basis, the report gets updated, then you know that person is using. But we don't have historical reports right now. That's something that people have asked for, and we hope to add that in the future. But it's not something that we can do today. Yeah, it just says it was run, yes. It doesn't say that it was run for 2 hours or 8 hours or a week, right? We don't show that level of detail.
But what you could do is, can't you view the like workbook activity and stuff like that? But I guess that's on the server side.
Yeah.
You can't see, I guess, on
Right.
the side.
So I actually, one thing that customers have done is that since it's a table in Postgres, they have actually archives on a daily basis, and they've actually joined the tables, and they've created the historic report. It's a little more painful, but if that's something that's useful to you, people have done that they have saved snapshots throughout on a daily basis, and they've created this historical report for themselves. Yeah. All right. So here are some of the resources. The one thing I did want you to take away from this presentation is that most of the things we've covered is already in the deployment guide. So that's your best friend if you're looking for anything that's to do with deploying Tableau desktops.
Where is that deployment?
It's published on along with our online help. But if you just search for desktop deployment guide, any browser will show you immediately. And there's a link also here. So you can download these slides. And so there's a link. The link is also here on this slide. Yeah. OK, so just to summarize what we've covered today, we showed you some questions to consider as you plan your deployment. We showed you some resources and tools that are available for you to plan. We also showed you the different deployment options that are available to you, some scripting that you can do. We talked about the new feature, which is ATR/virtual desktop support, that helps some of these pain points that customers have about deactivating their licenses, right, or losing licenses. And finally, we covered just a little bit of desktop reporting, which is a current way of tracking your deployment. And hopefully with that, you are all equipped to manage your desktops like a boss. All right, so we have more time for more questions now, but we also would love to have you fill our survey because it helps us get better for the next year. Maybe we could add to content or answer more questions. So please let us know how we did.